Hello. So, we are the women of Wyden and Kennedy Delhi, here to discuss the things that make us tick, that make us proud, that make us cry when it comes to the gender narrative in our country. So, let's begin. So, the idea was to kind of talk about the duality of the reality that we live in this country right now. Like on one hand, we really strongly opinionated. I wouldn't even call it opinionated. We're just like we want our basic rights, and but the moment we walk into our own living rooms with our parents, and we have to like smile politely and just nod politely to the you know ragingly sexist things they say, because it's just not worth the fight and we need to pick our battles and whatever else. And I mean, these are like really, I think, small micro versions of things. There are, of course, like completely like um, polar apart dualities that exist too, because of the country that we're in right now. I think Ojasvi had a example of that.
Yeah, so I could see the difference. Like, where in Punjab, all of us are so used to sexual harassment because the men, especially the millennials, the youngsters, are so jobless. Most people have businesses, so they don't have any career aspirations. So all they do is just roam around the small circle of the city and stalk women and follow them, tease them. So like my entire school life, I ended up learning how to drive well, just to get away with the following and the eve teasing and everything. I remember once my school was right here. It's like it was a 5 minute walk. I could have easily walked to the school every day and walked back, but my parents used to drive to pick me up and drive both ways. So this one time, my mom forgot to pick me up, and I was walking back, and an uncle on a scooter started following me. And I was, I think, 13 years old or like 14 years old. And I'm just like, what is this happening? And I just took out my bottle and I threw it at him.
There is another kind of thing that I have seen myself in workplaces. When one talks about sexual harassment, there is a lot of trauma involved in all of that. But I'm talking about very softer uh, stuff that people go through without realizing. Like Nanan touched upon it in terms of, you kind of walk into a living room and one of your parents or your relatives or whoever like kind of makes a remark which is absolutely incorrect, but it just comes out so naturally and it has been normalized in the family and you kind of don't take it upon as a battle. But in workplaces, especially advertising, has been a very very male centric kind of industry for a very long time. Having spent 18 years uh, in the industry across very big agencies like Ogilvy, Publicis, and all of that, I realized that it is the little things that kind of people used to get away with. Like in a bigger forum where there are men and women sitting, probably doing like they're jamming, they are trying to, think of some ideas. And even as an insight, a man would talk about something which is like, which is absolutely kind of incorrect in a way, whether it's got to do with women, how they are at work, how there is like a certain stereotype which is involved in terms of how they drive. That kind of becomes a joke. Everyone laughs. And as women also, you used to laugh because you could not be a part of that joke, or you could not be seen as someone who was getting offended, because that itself is a issue. That why do like women are oversensitive, women tend to react to things in a negative way. Like there are so many aspects to this, which we have for the longest period of time kind of just like not addressed. And now when there are conversations happening, whether on social media or whether in person or whether at work and all of that, we are now suddenly, if someone talks about it, they are like labeled as activists, that this one is always like taking up issues, why are you getting so offended and all of that. So I think that is another challenge that one faces, in terms of like kind of how do you deal with this day to day softer issues being a woman without seeming as someone who's constantly reacting to things or constantly getting offended. That to me I think is a far bigger challenge. And how do you kind of unnormalize whatever has been happening all of these years and say that, listen, we can still have a joke, we can still laugh at each other without making it about some bizarre thing that it's kind of inherently in your head that this is the way things happen.
I've noticed these days now that women have started speaking up, or like even sharing a post on Instagram. And if similar content has been shared from the same person a little too frequently, that person is seen as oversensitive, or someone who gets triggered by like anything that's related to women. And just because you're sharing something doesn't mean that uh, you're like the most like triggered person ever. You're just like talking about things that maybe 5 to 10 years ago women were not confident enough to talk about. Like, we have a platform these days, and we can leaving aside the condition of our democracy right now, like even though like the youth is trying to be suppressed by whatever is being orchestrated, um, I feel like these little terms like being triggered, or like DMing a person that, oh, I think you've taken up this cause so and so. Women shouldn't like shy away from this bullshit, and they should not take it to heart. And I've noticed a lot of people have just started ignoring all the spiel, and they should keep fighting on for their belief system. And luckily, a few of us have been raised in liberal environments to like still keep fighting for our beliefs and principles. And I'm just really glad to see people growing up, and like even though they haven't grown up in like the most liberal environments, but like through college or like other life experiences, they've started to realize that there's more to life than what your parents think, what your relatives think, what Tom, Dick, and Harry friend of yours thinks. So I feel like this is just the first step for like being yourself and being open about your convictions. And it should just keep going on. And fuck people who try to suppress your trail of thought, and unfriend, unfollow. If they don't like what you're saying, tell them to unfollow you and just live your life. Yeah.
I mean, I just wanted to kind of, build off of what Ruchika mentioned and what Serena said as well. That especially, in workplaces, there is, as much as you try to deny it, there is a very strong and very inherent dude bro culture. Like, the men are always watching out for each other, even if they seem like lovely people, and they must be, and they seem very woke, but men are very good at protecting their own kind. And as women, because we fought so much just for a seat at that table, it feels very unnatural to cause conflict over there, even if we see something that's offensive, because you don't want to be ostracized. You've worked so hard, you've probably worked twice as hard just to get here in the first place, and now you don't want to be ostracized and kicked off from that table for finding a joke offensive, or for something very trivial. But it's those trivial things that add up real quick, right? That is what is kind of building that culture. So, like Serena mentioned, in the kind of households that we're raised in, and in the kind of workplaces, every time we raise our hand and say that this is not okay, we're bringing about that micro change, and I love that. And I love that, women in professional settings also are setting up like these platforms and committees to kind of watch out for each other. Because, fuck fighting for a seat at that table. We can make our own tables. That's okay. We don't really need that anymore. And even to add on to what Nanan was saying right in the beginning about how hard it is to, fight something in your own living room. But every time that happens, I know for a fact, at least I am thinking that, you know what, I can't change that. This is how this relative of mine has thought for 15 years, and this is how they've been conditioned to become. And I can't really change that, but I know for a fact that I will not raise my kids like this, and I know for a fact that probably our parents thought the same thing, our moms thought that same thing, and that was their little act of rebellion when they decided that my daughter is not going to have the kind of life that I did. And then when we do that for the future generations, it and I'm not trying to put a positive spin on the whole situation. Of course there are things that we need to be vocal about and things that we need to be fighting about, and we should. But at the same time, it is heartening to see these little changes that come about as well.
All through my school life, like I've not had like super close female friends, because since you're a child, you're raised to sort of, like, girls are raised to sort of feel competitive with other women, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at a group of guys, not all of them have the same carbon copy personalities, but they somehow find a way to like coexist. Like their differences are not brought up as much. But when you look at a group of women, like if it's 3 or 4 women, you'll sort of feel like, oh, they are the same, right? So I feel like at least in men, they are more accepting of whether it's like the nerdy guy with like a sports oriented friend or something like that. But you see that less in women. Like maybe it's just an observation that I've had. So like even at work, I've realized that a lot of women end up going through similar experiences, even though like they're very soft uh, punches thrown by the opposite gender. But we all notice it. We all sort of fall back, and we don't retaliate after a certain point, because we don't know what the reaction to our retaliation is going to be. But I've realized that these shared experiences sort of create a sisterhood in a working environment. Like we might not react to it, but I can look into the other woman's eyes and tell that she is feeling the exact same thing that I'm feeling. And like, so I've noticed that I've gained a lot of female friends at work, because I think back in school and even in college, like we wouldn't feel comfortable enough to like even voice these opinions or go like, I'm going to support this woman, and I'm like, I feel for her, I empathize with her. But I think as you grow up with age and with these corporate and working environments that we have to sort of uh, get through and survive and thrive in, we do kind of finding kinship with our own,
Yeah.
and it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think one other thing that while Palak was talking and even Wagme, one thing that came to my mind was that even the way this entire Me Too movement happened, and it kind of like I was watching this series on Netflix. It's I think Martin Scorsese has directed it, and it's like an interview with Frank Lebowski. Uh, and yeah, I think I'm getting the name probably wrong, but basically, no one knew about her. Like when I started watching the documentary, it's about this woman, writer, who has had a writer's block since the 90s. But like the format is very interesting, and she's talking about New York and her experiences living in that city and all of that. And one of the things that she spoke about, which is so true, is that she said that this entire Me Too movement happened, but what amazed her was that it only mattered to everyone when a well known person or a celeb spoke. Suddenly, because they were suffering or they had suffered a sexual assault or all of that, it became a conversation. But the truth of the matter is that probably every single woman across the world has been through that experience. And which is true, but one of the things that came when I realized in my life was, especially at the workplace, was that men kind of, obviously it made them uncomfortable. I am pretty sure that every man at a certain level was uncomfortable with this thought of, it would must have kind of made them rewind in their own head what they could have said, what they may have like implied or whatever may have been construed in a very wrong way, which is great. I really felt that this is what is needed. Don't normalize, don't legitimize loose talk just because you are used to it. So I was kind of glad about that. But because of that discomfort, and they could not overly state that discomfort because just the way men are probably, they started kind of making a joke about it. And just to give you an example in terms of, like, they would say stuff like, maybe this should not happen because otherwise you never know, two years down the line it will be taken as something that I did wrong, and then they would laugh it off. And I was like, wow, I mean, that's the kind of dichotomy, that's the kind of uh, mindset you are dealing with, even with people who are your friends at work, for example, people you're very, very comfortable talking to. But that is the kind of triggers that are going through in their own heads in terms of how this society has been built, how like certain things which have been normal for so long are not normal anymore, and they have no clue how to deal with it. So either they kind of make a joke about it, or they kind of like go into a shell, or whatever ways they are dealing with it. And all of that is like, suddenly there was a time when there was a conversation of how certain women were taking advantage of this entire Me Too movement, and they started playing this blame game, and then they were tarnishing someone's, this entire cancel culture and stuff like that. And you're not making letting someone explain their side of the story. But like, again, I'm going back to the documentary, and like when Frank spoke and she said, I get that part of Me Too. I get that part, that there could be many men who also have been victimized because of the movement. But if a woman talks or shares her experience, I'm always going to believe her. And if you want me not to believe her, then you give me proof, then you give me evidence, you do the hard work, because of the way the entire culture and the bias has been created over centuries. It cannot just come down just because you say, hey, I didn't do it. That statement is not enough. Like, dig deep and prove it to me that you haven't done it.
I love that you brought it up because I watched that show as well. And that is one part that I resonated with so much. And this was a conversation that I was having with a friend a few days ago as well, about how, there are some of these situations, they're just going to be a classic he said, she said, right? There was probably nobody around to witness that. There are no receipts to show for it. There's no evidence. But if I ever hear a classic he said, she said, I will always choose to believe what she said. Like, if it's in my hands what to believe, I will always choose to believe what she said. Because women have nothing to gain from doing this, right? And we have everything to lose, for real. Like, you see the kind of bullshit that women are put through even after coming out with their stories, saying things like, why didn't you talk about this 30 years earlier when it happened? 30 years earlier, did you have the platform in which a woman would feel comfortable coming and talking about it? She still doesn't have that, right? So with that, with your police interrogations, with the kind of defamation in quotes that she's going to be carrying for the rest of her career, it takes an immense amount of courage to come forward and tell your story. It is obviously extremely triggering to have to go back and relive that experience, that trauma. And despite that, if she is choosing to come forward and do it, then the least that we can do is hear her out and support her, unless there's evidence to believe the contrary, right? And it's just so easy for men to raise their hands and be like, no, I didn't do it. How can you say that, I did it? Do you have any proof? But then there's also no proof to the contrary, and nobody is questioning that.
Like, even feminism is a woman's responsibility to do it with grace. and not make your voice reach a slightly different octave that might make somebody else feel like you're screaming, even if that person was an uncle following you on a scooter in your car, you know. Like, it's amazing how it's always the woman's responsibility. Of course, victim blaming is one of the biggest problems all over the world, but it's so much bigger than that, you know. Like, to every small detail, it's the girl who has to carry herself with grace. I can't, you know, who has to dress up a certain way, who can't look a certain way, and, you know, assumptions get like attached to you. If I have a point of view or an opinion at the workplace, I might be labeled aggressive, but a guy will be labeled confident. So these weird little things that exist.
When I was growing up, and I pretty much knew in my early 20s, I never wanted to get married. And there was absolutely no reason for it, just didn't feel like, you know. And I was the kind of kid who was, while growing up, was very sure about what I wanted to do. Now, did I make the right choices in hindsight? Who knows, you know. But So this was one of the things which I kind of told my mother, because, you know, she was like asking me, and they were very open about the fact that I can be in a relationship, I can suggest whoever I want to get married, and here I am, not even like, you know, trying 5%. So she tried a bit on her own, and then she gave up in a few months. She was like, oh my god, this matrimonial thing is a complete disaster, I don't want to do this. Because, you know, strange questions like, is your daughter beautiful, does she have long hair? And she's like, how am I supposed to answer this? One, my daughter doesn't have long hair. And if someone asks me, is your daughter beautiful, every parent will say, even if they aren't, you know. So but the fact that my parents were still okay with it, ideally, in an ideal world, they would have wanted me married, but there was never a there was no pressure as such for me. But then the great thing about this was that she kind of blocked me from all the relatives conversations around marriage, because this again becomes like, oh, how is this that she's growing up and she's still not married, and this and that and all of that. And she kind of dealt in with it in her own way, and she was kind of telling them that, you know, she's a certain way, she doesn't want to get married, and it's fine and all of that. But now I think the change that I'm seeing is that I have a 15-year-old niece, soon to be 16, and she is being brought up in the same house but with a completely different mindset. Like when I was in my teenage, I never used to get into the kitchen, so my mother would say, learn something, how otherwise how are you going to manage in your husband's house, you know. This is like just like a random conversation I am sure all of us have had at some point, in terms of learn how to cook because you have to take care of your family. uh, that conversation has completely ended, you know, in our family. There is no such thing as, in fact, like my nephew who's 12 years old is more active in the kitchen, and it is encouraged and all of that. So I, of course, I feel that this duality that you're talking about, and the fact that, you know, there is a general rhetoric that we kind of have lived with, those things are changing. But at the same time, if you look at, for example, the entire social media movement against a certain celebrity in our country, some months back, when Riya Chakravarti was being kind of blamed for every single thing that was going wrong in this country. What I found astonishing was the fact that the news channels were showing her with a very provocative headline and taking pictures from the scenes where she's wearing less clothes, you know, because they wanted to kind of set a narrative around her. It's exactly like women are always coming with certain baggages which you can kind of exploit, which you don't tend to do with men. And then that one image of her in sitting in a bikini with some provocative headline about her doing drugs and, you know, supplying drugs to her boyfriend or whatever, entered the WhatsApp chats of all uncles and aunties, where they said, yeah, there must be something absolutely wrong about her, and, you know, she's the one who would have caused it and all of that. So I'm saying that, imagine that all of us are sharing personal experiences, but it all comes down to the fact that this is the way patriarchy and our general outlook towards women has been, and it is around. Like, these WhatsApp uncle aunties are people we know, you know. We may have chosen to kind of block them from our WhatsApps, but those conversations still exist.
Just adding on to that, it's very weird to, like, a very tiny observation I made after that boys' locker room thing. It's always women who are blamed for everything. It's not a new thing, it's not something that just started. It's been there. So I was speaking to another female friend of mine, and we were discussing boys' locker room and how during the entire boys' locker room, the girlfriends were blamed that, why did they support the guys? Why did they, why were they helping them? Why were they aiding them? Why did they not stop them? Like, bloody hell, man, they're like 16-year-old girls. It's not their responsibility to raise those boys. I mean, they're not mothers. And the same thing with Riya Chakravarti. Like, dude, like that guy, like Sushant, whatever happened was wrong, but he was old enough. Like, he didn't need a mother to feed him drugs. Like, if he wanted drugs, he could have just bought them, or he could have just gotten them. Like, it was his choice to take it. She didn't force it into him, right? And the same thing happened. And it was funny. Like, my friend was like, but the girls should have stopped him. The girls should have stopped the boys. They were dating him. And I was like, man, she's dating him, not mothering him. Like, it doesn't matter what we do or what we do not do. It's our responsibility, what we wear, what we do, what the boys do, what everyone else does. And it's not just with us. It's like, I've seen it with my own mother as well. Like, if something, say I do something which is not accepted in my family, the blame is like, तुमने लड़की को ठीक से नहीं पाला, like you didn't raise her well. It's your fault that she went bad. And now, like, say I score like 100% grades in my board exams, वो तो हमेशा से अच्छी थी पढ़ने के लिए. Like, it's just a switch, like an instant switch that I've seen go on, which goes around. Anything that goes wrong, it doesn't matter what it is. It might just be a man's fault. It just, like, we find a reason to blame the woman for everything.
I think there is another North Indian phenomena. I don't know whether it is across, is the fact that there is a comment that gets made where they say that women mature faster than men.
Yeah.
And that is why, in an ideal scenario, the man should be older than the woman. Because otherwise there are always going to be clashes if, like, the woman is of the same age, or if she's older, because she's any. So this entire responsibility of me being more mature than another guy of my age is like, it's so strange. I mean, and that is why it also comes into our work sphere as well, where if you tend to react in a certain way, like I think one of you had made this comment that if a man says something, he's confident, but when a woman says something, she's aggressive. So like, even having an opinion becomes like a challenge, because the weight of responsibility is such that we are always supposed to be like mothers from our childhood, and we are supposed to like be a certain way. So that also I just kind of find as a huge like flux in the way women are perceived. And how do you break these stereotypes, how do you break these biases, and like say that judge me for the what I'm saying. I mean, hear me out, and don't have any preconceived notions about me just because I'm from a certain gender.
It's so funny that you mentioned about how like the women mature faster than men, and which is why you should find a partner older than you. And I mean, the inherent assumption in that is that if he's older than you, then you'll be at the same intellectual level, and yet you are expected to mother him later. So I don't know how all of that adds up, but sure, whatever.
It's bizarre, man. Like, our country can come up with amazing bullshit at times.
When I was in kindergarten, so my dad cooks professionally, and they gave us this sheet of a family tree. They were teaching us family tree things, and they were like, okay, Dash cooks at home. And I wrote dad cooks at home because dad cooks. The teacher she marked it wrong, okay? And I went and I'm like, why is this wrong? Okay. And she's
Oh my
like,
God.
no, mom is cooking at home. I refused to listen to her. I'm like, no, my dad cooks at home. I fully fought with her. It got really bad. They went to the principal, they reported me. And then
Wow.
the principal, I fought with the principal. No, my dad cooks at home. And then they called up my parents and they called them to the school. And then they're like, this is what your daughter is doing. She's saying dad cooks at home. And my dad goes, but I do cook at home. It was just so amazing.
Bizarre.
And it just
So
blows
bizarre.
my mind that they're teaching 3-year-olds this in school. Like, why? And like, why is this why is this such a part of your like education system? Why is this so accepted? Like, of course, the problem is so widespread that it almost makes one feel so helpless and frustrated to think about it, because like something as widespread as media, like headlines, like you were saying, Ruchika, like it it's they are doing it to sensationalize it. We all know that, and we know all these WhatsApp spreads, messages and all are also from that point of view. How does one even begin to correct them? How does one even, like, it just saddens me and just frustrates me to such a excessive level. I'm sure it does everyone, because how does one get around this kind of, like, of course it starts at home. You start talking to people, you start talking to your family and all of that, but it is impossible to like reach every single person. And it's
Yeah.
almost, how every household has their own traditions and their own nuances of every day. They also have their own nuances of sexism. It's every household has its own set of, like, this is how we are sexist and this is how they are sexist, and hum to unse thode zyada liberal hai, so you should be happy. It's just, yeah.
But do you think that, I completely understand, and I also feel that the way women are objectified, and all of these perceptions that get created is a lot to do with the entire creative industry, also how it works. Look at Bollywood, look at the music that we kind of uh, listen to, not we as people, like whatever, but the kind of music that is running at a mass level, where all of those crass jokes become like a fun song that where people dance to at parties. And I'm not even talking about tier 2, tier 3 towns. I'm talking about metro guys. I'm talking about guys who are going to pubs and bars and dancing on those songs, and this thing. And I always feel that, kind of every time saying we need reforms in laws, we need reforms in policing to fix it. And to your point, Nenan, it all has to start from home, where you say that there is a problem in the upbringing itself, and obviously when you kind of wrap your head around it, you're like, oh my god, with 1.3 billion people, it's freaking, it's impossible to even think, like, just in our lifetime it's not going to happen.
So I had a few questions for everybody. I mean, I'll just ask them and then we can go around the room answering them. And here's the first. How do you think feminism has evolved in India and in your own personal lives?
So just I think, purely from an observation point of view, feminism, I think, was always there, and it was in many forms. But I feel that at that point, and I'm talking about the 80s, 90s, probably even like the early 2000s, uh, feminism was kind of restricted to a very small group of people. Maybe it was a bit niche in its conversation, in its reach, and all of that. Probably it was happening in people's living rooms or at smaller levels through organizations and stuff. But I think the last 7 8 years, probably after Facebook took off and then all of these social media platforms came into being and became extremely popular, it has given some sort of a voice, some sort of like a platform where you see that it is not restricted to like a small group of women. It's like at an individual level, each one of us has kind of spoken up at times. We may not be like, we may not be doing it actively, but we are doing it in our own little ways. Uh, Obviously, the Me Too movement was kind of central to it, where it kind of took off and it became like a much larger conversation. But personally, I don't think that feminism is restricted to that thing alone. It has got to do with women's rights. It has got to do with equality. It has got to do with pay differences. It's got to do with, in general, how women are perceived in India, in middle class families or lower middle class families, how they are treated, and certain taboos that are attached to us. So for me, I think it has evolved, though it still kind of is not like a mass movement, probably because uh, like, everything is kind of slow to take off here because of varied reasons, because of our own ecosystem, education, awareness, and everything. But I just feel that it in a sense it's growing, and it is like but it can be a much larger conversation compared to what it is right now. I mean, that's my take.
Yeah, like even I've noticed that since the whole Me Too episode like started, and a lot of my friends also spoke up about their experiences on Facebook and Instagram, and they everyone wasn't as welcoming of their experiences, and people try to negate these experiences as, oh, it's a one off, or maybe you're just too soft. But I think that movement triggered this thing of like women actually speaking up and coming to terms with their own experiences, and gradually ignoring the bullshit that people have to say about their truth. And it's not easy for women to speak up in generally in life or at a workplace, because they think a lot about the repercussions of speaking up. They think and overthink, but I think gradually with time, it's changing, and it's much appreciated, because I feel like the more you see people speak up for themselves, it sets a better example for people who are just entering the industry and seeing a decent treatment of like people just being vocal about what they feel is right and what isn't.
So I am very fortunate because I come from a family that has always seen like all the kids, like with 3 kids, like we've always seen equality as part of our everyday life. So we've seen our dad in the kitchen, we've seen our mom doing electrical things, we've been asked to like do our own chores, even though we all had a lot of help with like army bhaiyas all around. So we never really, I don't think I had like a word for it. It was always equality. But I think when I joined Delhi University and I was doing English literature, I think there was the first time I was introduced to the word feminism, and truly introduced to it, because uh, it was basically another version of what equality was. It was anything that was anti patriarchy, anti feminism, anti oppression of women was feminism, but in totality, it was equality. So I kind of realized that I'd always been like a closeted feminist, because that's the kind of family I came from. And I think the one big defining moment in my life where I kind of actually like understood a very wholesome meaning of feminism was the fact that my brother was, in a way, even though we came from such a like a liberal household, was not allowed to pursue a certain subject, but he was kind of motivated or encouraged towards doing his engineering and his MBA. And that's when I kind of realized that feminism is all about equality, because if a patriarchal structure is not just speaks against women, it's equally against men as well. So because the gender roles are so thoroughly defined, if a woman has to be a woman, then a man also has to be a man, and that can be very, very overbearing, and can be like very, very like a lot of work for a man, is what I think. And I think we've never spoken about that part of feminism. So I think that was like the defining moment in my life where I kind of understood like the actual meaning of feminism. And through that, I think it has definitely evolved, because people have now started to realize that a feminism is, as a word, is not bad, which we've all lived through. Feminist means you're anti men. That means you have to cut your hair, burn your bra. That's all we've been hearing. But that's not what it is about. And I think men and women in society have started learning that feminism is not about that, but it is also, it's not biological. Just because you're a woman, you're supposed to be feminist is not the case anymore. You can, it's an ideology. Like Kamala Hassan puts it very easy, like, I've seen women who are equally patriarchal, and I've seen men who stand up for the rights of women. So it's definitely not part of your biological making. It's simply an ideology. And I think people have now, it's very slow, though it is still very frustrating when, like, you all you women have been saying, like when you come into a conversation and start speaking against things, they're like, oh, here comes the feminist. It's still very annoying. The narrative is still the same, but I do think that definition of feminism is now being is better understood by men and women around us, and I think that's where I see it evolving a little more. Like with the Me Too movement, when we did see episodes of men coming out and talking about sexual harassment, is when people started to, oh, so it's just about oppressing through gender, and that's what you need to fight against. So for me, I think it is definitely very, very slow. But the one thing that I've started to see evolve, at least in our country, in India, and especially maybe in Delhi, is this whole narrative around what feminism really means. It's only about equality. When you stand against sexism, when you stand against gender equality, it's just a different word, because you want to highlight that particular problem of the world. It's the same thing like when people say Black Lives Matter and when people say all lives matter. That's bullshit, because yes, of course, all lives matter, but this specific movement, this particular context, this particular voice is for Black people who are suffering. So just to like dilute it by saying like, oh, why can't you just say equality, why do you have to say feminism? I think people are starting to realize, because that's what you need to do. You need to look it through those eyes, through that context of oppression, and that's when you realize that's all about equality. So I think that's, for me, is slightly now evolving in Delhi, at least in India maybe, but it's a very, very slow journey. But at least we started having those conversations.
I feel like it is definitely evolving. Like a lot of people before us have made it possible for us to maybe even have this conversation right now. And but I feel like India in general operates in extremes. So one extreme is of course aggressively, evolving, wants to evolve. There are conversations that are happening, and there's one complete other extreme which might be getting worse. And I have no idea. Like, and then there's like this entire thing in the middle where people. So it's leading to like. So like there are two extremes of the spectrum, and a whole bunch of people that populate the center of it, and there's so much miscommunication, misunderstanding. In my life, I've noticed more often than not, I meet people who are already at this mindset of being equal, but they don't understand why, like Aparna said, feminism is called feminism and it's not called equalism or something. And yeah, another thing was that while I feel like us girls have made this, little tribe where right from when we were in school, we kind of raised each other with feminism. Like, I feel like that's not something our parents have done. That's not something our mentors in school have done or anything. That's purely something we've done for our own selves. And sometimes I feel like the men missed out on it. They didn't get the memo of they can cry, or they didn't get the memo of like a really close friend of mine whose sister is exactly like me, and she's like raised like me and she works like me. But this friend of mine, when he wanted to take up humanities in school, he was told, no, you're the eldest son, you have to do science. You have to provide for your family and your future wife's family and things. In the same household, these two really different narratives exist.
No, I just wanted to like weigh in on this real quickly, because we were talking about the Me Too movement, and my experience with that was actually a little different, though equally traumatic, because somebody I know very well got called out. And for me, honestly, there was so much to process, because my experience with that person had been so different from the stories that I was hearing, so there was so much like dissonance in my head about, because of course there is this part of me who, believes that I will believe the women at all costs. But at the same time, what they're saying is not matching up with the idea of that person that I had in my head. And it was honestly a lot to process, because at once, that this is somebody that you've looked up to as a mentor, as a teacher, who suddenly is a predator now, and that's a lot to do, in your head. And at the same time, you also, I was kind of wondering that, does this make me a pseudo feminist? Because it's okay to have all these opinions when it's something that's general and not affecting your own life, but like for the first time, when it's actually playing into my life, my instinct is to defend the man. And so when we talk about feminism being an evolving journey, it's not just evolving socially, but it's also evolving personally. And I think it was quite a process for me and my mental health to understand that it's okay for me to take the time to process, and it's okay for me to not immediately have an opinion which is one extreme or another, and that was my journey as a feminist. And that's completely all right. And I think somebody on Twitter put this very eloquently, that of course, this movement it's not perfect, but the bigger problem is that we're bothered by imperfect feminism than generations of like systemic misogyny. That movement is perfect and we're defending it very well, and that is what should be bothering us more than feminism is.
What made you a feminist? Like, if there's like an anecdote or like a moment from your own life where you think, like you saw it happen in front of your eyes and, you realized it's you against the world. Like, was there a defining moment? Or if it was even, of course, it's like conditioning over time. But if there was one thing.
I didn't know the word feminism, but my life was super nice until my brother was born. So when my brother was born, and I just started comparing things like, okay, I get to do this, but my brother doesn't have to. And why things are changing, like why is his life different and my life different? So I didn't even know, like I just started questioning my parents, like why, like it's because it's changing me. Like you don't let me do so many things which can basically change my future, but my brother gets to do it. So yeah, I just became really angry person, and yeah, since then.
I think I was born that way, because I was always like, I think it was in my genes. I had to be like this. I was playing cricket when I was 7 years old. I never had dolls. I never had toys. I don't know whether that makes me a feminist, but I think I was always like extremely extrovert, and I was playing and all my friends were boys. So, my mannerisms, my way of thinking and all of that became like that. And though my parents were not really this thing about my brother and me, but I started acting out at times, in terms of like when my mother would say, you should like learn something from in the kitchen. I was like, tell your son first. And I am talking like I'm much older than you guys. I'm talking about many years back. And like I was a rebel without a cause from that sense, because I just made even this cooking, learning to cook, getting married also an issue as a teenager. I was like, I don't even understand these conversations, and don't have these chats with me. I don't relate to it. I'm not going to make food. I did not make food till maybe 6 years back, when I got into it myself, and I was like, I want to make food because I want to eat good food. I'm just bored of the food I'm eating and stuff. So I think for me, it was like it was inherent. It is who I am as a person. There was no, and I think with time, my conversation and my understanding has evolved. But I think it was always there. It was always in me.
That's also so wrong though, right? For like a child to sit and think that just because I play cricket, I'm not a girl. Or just because I don't have dolls, I'm not a girl. Like, how can you put these things on little kids?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think today, if a girl was to do this, probably the conversation will be a bit different. I mean, it still might be there, but yeah, I was called a tomboy. I mean, imagine like that is a terminology which has been legitimized. You don't call a boy a girl or something. Whatever. You always, there is another part to it where you say, oh, I think he looks gay. He's effeminate. He's not manly. So all sorts of labels exist. Similarly, in my case, she's a tomboy, she doesn't like, even within my family, when will you behave like a girl? And I was like, what is behaving like a girl? I'm just saying, I think in my case, thankfully, none of this mattered. Anytime anyone would question my behavior or my attitude or my looks or the way I was dressing up, I never ever was bothered. And I'm, thank God, and it was no one's influence. I was not getting influenced positively or negatively. It is who I am as a person from the beginning. So I just learned to deal with it in my own way. And I never ever it didn't play in my head if someone said, sit properly. This is like a typical living room conversation in Indian families. Saying, just sit like a woman. Yeah, you're not supposed to sit like that. What is this don't sit cross-legged, don't sit with your legs wide open or whatever. So if any time it would happen, I would be like, this is the way I sit, deal with it, which is good. I think that somewhere I asserted myself and the conversations kind of reduced because my people around me realized that this is who she is. You cannot change. Or maybe in their head, they felt that you can't fix me, maybe I'm like completely broken from that point of view. But whatever it was, I think it worked for me because of the person I am, but probably it doesn't work for a lot of girls who kind of, uh, go through this kind of a very subtle, very soft trauma, and it kind of starts shaping their personalities. So yeah.
I mean, it feels like you're talking about me when you were mentioning all these pointers, tomboy, playing cricket. I was into sports all my life since birth. And I mean, I was called out like a tomboy, and it never bothered me. I'm like, ha, hai, to, so what? And somehow my parents and everyone in my family knew that, you can't change her. She is how it is. Like, my dad would dress me up like a boy because my elder sister is a girl and they thought I'll be a boy, which did not turn out to be the case. And I was born like my entire life has been, I get to do everything that a boy does. Like, I was driving when I was 16. I could ride a bike whenever I felt like, and nobody questioned, why is she doing all of this? That's probably because my upbringing has been like that my parents were cool with it. I know, like, there were times when, relatives would be like, how is she sitting with her legs up on the table, and where are her manners? And my parents like, she is this like this only, like, you can't change her, and if you want to, then you go ahead and try to do it, but she'll not do anything that you want her to do. So I guess it was since birth, like in your case, Rajika,
Yeah,
similarly
yeah, absolutely. It's
with me.
exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yeah.
But the strange part is how relatives in India, especially, feel like they have some authority to give a critical analysis on how this so and so niece of theirs lives their life. And like, I've honestly started avoiding bigger social gatherings, like with relatives, especially weddings, because oh no, she's
Same.
27 and she's doing a job and she has zero intentions of getting married
Getting
anytime
married.
soon. So very slyly, some aunties are going to go like, "Oh, I know a boy. You might like him." So I'd rather not engage in in such conversations and probably trigger some aunties with uh, a bit of a no to their bullshit, because I think we are way past this. Like, maybe it's just how we've been raised, but we don't think about when we are getting married. Like, is it going to be in 6 months, a year, 3 years down the line? So why should we entertain conversations like this with random people who we meet like maybe twice a year? So I guess it's again like our wiring and like how we've been raised and the kind of environment we've grown up with, courtesy social media, where we do see a lot of people normalizing such conversations, and it doesn't feel weird to like stand up to even your relatives about things like this.
The next question, which is kind of related, which is, who are your Indian feminist icons?
So I can actually answer the previous and this question together. So like, I've never really had like a moment where I kind of realized I was a feminist. Is only when I like started university and started reading literature, I kind of like realized that that's how I've been all my life. Like I said, I was like always a closeted feminist. But yes, there have been moments in my life where I have realized the importance of having like of why we need, like every time, like there are moments that have answered the question for me, why do we need feminism? So like it started, like one of the instances I spoke about was my brother wanting to do a certain subject but wasn't allowed to because as a man, or as a eventually who has to like bring up a family and whatnot, has to have like an engineering degree and an MBA degree. And one of the very recent few example of when it hit me of why we need feminism is regarding my sister who's elder to me. She's a psychologist and she was in the middle of doing her PhD and she got married and then she got pregnant. and she gave up everything, her PhD, her career. She was practicing in WIMHANS, everything. And I had a very, very long and a very, very, like, I was very disappointed. I was like, I don't know what she's doing with her life. She studied all her life. She's been always been a good student. She's doing so well. She was in the middle of like 2 years into a PhD, and now she's giving it all up just to bring up a child. Like, why can't you do both? And like that kind of a discourse and narrative, I started pushing on her that, this is not okay. That we've all learned that we've spent so much time and money on our education, and you need to have this in your life, and you have to have an identity, otherwise you lose it and whatnot. And she just sat me down and had a very simple conversation with me, which made me realize how wrong I was, because she's like, it's all about making choices. You just free, the fact that you're feminist and you are all for equality also means that you get to make free choices. And if that choice is for me to give up my entire career to bring up my child, that's my choice. And that's where I kind of get my strength. So you might look at it as a big sacrifice this woman is making to bring up a child, but that's my sacrifice. I chose it for myself. So that choice is my feminism, is my interpretation of that word. And just the fact that I've got the power to make this choice for me without anyone questioning me is all I want. And I think this was very, very recent, and it kind of hit me, and I realized, okay, that's another reason why you need feminism in your life. And again, it's an ideology, it's not biological in any way. And that kind of does make her my feminist ideal, because she now has a son, which is great, because I think it's very, very important for all these women to have son, because you all women, maybe that's another thing that we've been doing. We've been so after like raising women in a certain way, in a good way. I think a lot of mothers forget they also have to raise men in a certain way. It has to be equal. Like what Nanan was saying, it's the same household, but two different narrative, two different discourses, because all women think that you have to bring up your daughter in a way that she stands up for herself and all of that. But they sometimes do forget that they have to bring up their sons also in a way. So she's like my ideal for that, because she's now bringing up a son who is doing everything that he wants to do. He gets to pick his own toys. It's pink is not a bad color. Pink is not related to a gender. He likes to cook, so he's got a kitchen set at home. He gets to pick his own clothes. He gets to pick his own movies and do things, and doesn't like sport. Okay, that's fine. So I think it's she has now become this one person in my life that I look up to, because she's actually living what we've all been preaching all this while, and bringing up a man who eventually will be like a person who believes in this very equal world, and will always talk and advocate for equality and speak up against patriarchy. So yeah, I would say that would be my elder sister. Very, very brave of her.
I talk to my mother about this often. And I mean, of course, like she's in her 50s. So back when she was about to get married, or was at the age to be married off, there's this whole manic energy in households that, oh, she's hit that age, find a guy ASAP and get her married off. She's at the right age. They are willing to make their daughters drop their education also at that point, just so that they can get married off. I have friends who've actually done that. Like they dropped out of college in second year because this girl's family thought that they are not going to find a better match. He's loaded, is probably going to take care of her well. And she was missing from college for like a good week or two. And suddenly we are hearing that the match is set and she's not coming back. So anyway, going back to my mom's experience. So well educated, she was a national level dancer, and she had her own dreams. Like she had interests in geography, and she wanted to perhaps like get into like reporting or something. But eventually she had to get married off, and like even after getting married, she couldn't pursue a career, even though she explored like a bunch of things later, and she's a successful psychotherapist now. But back when she had just gotten married, she didn't have the permission or the right environment that encouraged her to pursue a career. So from her personal experiences, she knew that she can't raise her daughters like this. And she, like, I feel super lucky that she didn't tell us that you have to get into a stream like this, even though she was from a family of doctors and educators. And she's like, it's your life. Do a job that's going to keep you engaged and something that you have to live with. It's your life. Like, you're going to be doing this for the next 25, 30, 40 years. Like, pick something that's going to make you happy. And I shouldn't have to force you to find a stream or something that is going to get you a good job or an opportunity later. It's your life. Even though you're still like in school and you're figuring out your life, like, I shouldn't be telling you what you're good at. Like, figure it out. Like, she's like, I'll give you whatever fucking options, or like, if you want me to make you meet people, like, to help you sort your brain out, just know that you have to live with this reality. And I'm just super happy that like, back then a kid can't appreciate things like that, because they're like, oh fuck, I have to figure out my life, like I have to figure a college right now, and it feels like a lot of pressure. But I'm just so happy in retrospect that she let me be and let me figure out my own life, because I feel like I have no regrets now. And like, I see so many people my age doing things that they don't see themselves doing for the next 10, 15 years, and I feel bad for them. So it's really a privilege to be raised by women who don't let their kids go through what they've been through.
I really agree with what Serena is saying, because my experience has kind of been the same as well. So I am an only child, and I went to an all-girls school. So for the longest time, I didn't have a different frame of reference. I did not think of this as being a feminist or being an advocate for equality, because I just did not know another way of being. Like, this had been my reality for a very long time, and I just thought that's how the world is. And then after, I went to college, and I used to spend a lot more time on the daily with men. And, I would listen to these jokes made in poor taste that I just didn't find funny. Like, I did not laugh at them because I did not find them funny. And I would hear these things said so casually that it just bothered me. And suddenly I became this person filled with opinions, because I used to call that out constantly. And I used to notice it more because I had never in the past had the opportunity of kind of just writing it off, or, accepting it that, this is how it is. It had not been like that for me for a very long time. So I would constantly call it out. And that, kind of made me this person who's extremely opinionated and who is very intimidating, quote unquote. And it maybe kind of for a little while made me realize that I am the problem. Like, I am causing a lot of conflict where there shouldn't be. And thankfully that changed very quickly when I started working, because I was lucky enough to meet this wonderful, wonderful group of women who to this day are my closest friends, my most active group chat. And we're all just so fiercely supportive of one another, and I'm honestly so lucky to have that community. And we're all from very different backgrounds. Of course, we've all worked in the media and advertising, so we're kind of living that alt lifestyle. We're not your docile women that we're supposed to be, I guess. But I have friends who've come from much smaller towns where a lot of things that we acknowledge as an everyday given were just not a possibility. And we're all leading our own little lives and our own little forms of rebellion, but just loving each other and fiercely supporting each other through all of that. And just having that community and having that support system to fall back on makes all of this so much easier. And I'm just, incredibly lucky and privileged to have that.
Doing what we do, is there do we think that we have this added responsibility? And can we actually impact real change as far as this entire conversation goes?
So in my previous stint, there was a brand which had come to us. It was for a dating app. And basically the way they had built the entire ecosystem of that app was to make it very, very secure for women, because in general a dating app for women in India, like, I mean, how like it works in terms of, if a guy is there, he'll keep swiping right to everything and anything. And and once like you respond, it can also get a bit scary and stuff. So the entire ecosystem that they built was around the fact that how can you make it secure. So I will not get into the features of it, but I think what, as an insight that came to us from the fact, was that what you are doing is that you are putting the woman in control. You are saying that the decision making, the way you want to maneuver in this digital space of picking like-minded people, a man who you can have a conversation with without any agendas, what could it be which comes from something which is inherent to a woman herself. And one of the things which we felt, and I'm sure you all would agree, at least I can speak for myself, is that as women we have a gut instinct. you know we always have this intuition in our head about things that may happen, that could have happened, or whatever. Like instinctively it comes very naturally to us. And the tagline that got cracked for it was, basis this insight, basis the fact that women are being empowered and they have this gut instinct and this intuition. The line that came about was, uh, when it's right. So basically what you are saying is that I'm giving you an app where you will take that decision, where you are going to call the shots, because I am giving you an environment which is unlike other, where you are not supposed to be at the receiving end all the time. You're going to decide when it feels right. So a mixture of empowerment and a mixture of your own self, your own gut instinct. So, and I felt that it was in the right space, at least in terms of the narrative that it was trying to create.
I'll give an example of a client that we have. And so we got a brief from them, and it was just a general Women's Day brief, which was, let's make a social post about Women's Day, and that's that. And they, with that, wanted to do a little giveaway for all their employees as well. And the giveaway was like a mirror, pocket mirror with like and they wanted, us to brand that for them. And this, now, by this point, I had become jaded enough to know that anything that I do doesn't have any real change in the real world. But this particular brief just reignited that fire in me, and I was just like, no, this is not happening. I will not take it. Unfortunately, I did, it wasn't just me alone. The team was like filled with like-minded women who were equally triggered, and all of us just got together and we were like, this is the brief. We have to make one social post which will ultimately end up looking really performative and give this one giveaway. We're not going to do this. We're going to try, so in the same timeline, deliver a better outcome, which eventually was, so we kind of just came up with these, we came up with an execution that was very, that normalized this conversation, that put it out there in the world in a very normal, everyday way without being extremely aggressive or like, that stereotype around feminists or anything. It was just very casual, very normal. And we made a whole campaign about, like a small little social campaign about this. And then, so it wasn't just one social post anymore. And so then we went to the clients and we presented this to them and we're like, this is why you don't think, we don't think you should do this. And this is what we think you should do instead. And we didn't think that was a conversation we'd win going in, to be honest, but we did, and they saw it. And I think the year after and the year after that, their brief started evolving. So the year after that, their brief wasn't anymore to like, make a social post or just give them pocket mirrors anymore. But it was to like, okay, we did this campaign last year that took this conversation a little forward on social media. How can we take that a little forward too? So I think it was really important that we also try to understand the client's perspective, like where we know that they won't be able to talk in a particular kind of a language, or they won't be comfortable putting a particular type of work out there. So, but it's about reaching like this little Goldilocks zone between them and us, so that everyone's happy and no compromises made. That was one small little nugget that I feel like we left in the world.
I mean, as most brands do, their marketing teams, they basically make like a list of a social calendar that today is so and so day, next week it's Holi, blah, blah, blah. So they function on this basis of creating one-off posts that create engagement, and that, yes, we are aware of what's happening and we are covering all topical subjects. But I feel like brands don't realize the impact that they can have, and how much their own voice can actually impact the whole situation. And I feel like brands should just stop thinking about like changing the entire world with one post, and like stop making everything so generic as shit. And it's fine if your content just reaches a few people and it can affect and impact a few people. It's fine. Like you can do one of things like that. And I feel like when we did that with this particular client for Women's Day, like clients usually just get worried about, oh, this is going to trigger a few people. It's not massy enough. But I am so happy that we've got a chance to work with people who actually see reason and like understand the role of a creative person and their point of view. And it's really nice to work with marketing people who are willing to change, who don't just think about like, oh, today is done, what are we doing tomorrow? And they don't live day to day, they think about the future. And like with partnerships like this, it's like, I think that's super gratifying for creatives personally. And it makes the work exciting. It actually feels like what I am as a person, I can, a bit of that can reflect in my work as well. And I know for a fact that a bunch of us women who were working on that account at that point, we were super happy just because we were doing stuff that meant a lot to us. And it's not just a 9 to 5. And so, yeah.